Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to unpick the election results again from the point of view of that great divider of the nation, Brexit, specifically the elections in England and Wales. Scotland is a very different thing with a different video. Tomorrow I am hoping. I'd have liked to have done that for today, but I don't know whether the results have all been confirmed by the time you're watching this, but they certainly weren't by the time I was recording it. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news in politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So there are, I sort of said before, there are so many angles that I have thoughts when it comes to these elections, so many things to unpick. And there's also so many spurious arguments being presented. And I'd like to tackle them all, but I am going to limit myself. But there are going to be more videos. But I'm going to start off with Brexit here today. And I'm going to begin that with a couple of observations from other people. And that's what they are. They're observations. You can feel free to disagree with them. And the first one is from a commentator, Dmitry Grozobinski, very bad with names. And he said a few days ago, or a couple of days ago, Labour's Brexit strategy has been masterful in that it somehow managed to convince Leavers it is a Remain party, while convincing Remainers it really isn't. And this has been the problem ever since 2016 and now spans two Labour leaders. And for me, I think the best way I can expose the madness is by comparing it to the funding of public services. Like, you bring up the spectre of Brexit, and there are people, and I'm talking about inside the Labour movement here, not just Labour supporters, actually inside the Labour movement, a minority, but a vocal minority, who will say that arguing against Brexit is to call the working class who voted for it stupid. Oh, why are you calling our own voters stupid? But let's do this with public service funding. If the Conservatives won an election, as they have multiple times, on promises of increasing the involvement of the private sector in public services, would those same Labour supporters, members, get on board with privatisation just because the Conservatives won an election on the policy? Would they say, oh, well, we need to support privatisation now because working class voters supported it? No, of course they wouldn't. Many of them would rather die. So why do they think we should support one Tory policy and not another? This is the madness within Labour. The demon that has to be slain so that we can actually start hammering the destruction that it is causing. Another madness is that very often the same people who complain that Starmer is not opposing the government, oh, we don't have an opposition anymore, do their nut every time someone suggests, well, yeah, this is right, we should be opposing the government on Brexit. Oh, no. Apparently, he's only supposed to oppose some Tory policies, not all of them. But the election has drawn some very interesting Brexit-y themed results. Nothing conclusive. Some people are going a bit overboard with this. Now, I want to be really clear here. You, if you are interested in these elections, and if you're watching this video, you are interested in these elections, will have seen people coming at the results from a particular angle. Labour need to do this more, or they've been getting this thing wrong. You know, everyone has their hobby horse, and people will look at the election results through the lens of that hobby horse. And some of them will make very, very valid comments. Some of them will make very spurious comments. In fact, I may do a video on some of those spurious comments. But there will be lots of comments through that single lens. There are multiple things here. There's not just one thing. There's multiple things. But we all have our hobby horse, and mine is Brexit. So I'm not going to go mad. There were points of interest from a Brexit point of view. But before that, a second statement, this time from Andrew Adonis, former Labour minister. He said that Labour popularity, which was doing well towards the end of 2020, absolutely it was, you know, if that had carried on, we wouldn't be having these discussions even. So at the end of 2020, Labour were looking pretty good. And it took a nosedive, he said, when it supported the Brexit deal and then didn't attack the government for the consequences. Now, this statement I partially disagree with. The two events followed each other, certainly, although not as closely as he might suggest. And absolutely, I am convinced that if the party had really hammered the Brexit consequences Labour would be having more of an impact in these elections. It would certainly be making a stand on something. But more on that in a moment. But we also have to acknowledge that the government are riding high on the success of the vaccine rollout, especially compared to our neighbours. It's all comparative in politics. And easing the lockdown that was only necessary because the government's so crap. But that's also given them a boost. You know, I mean, that is Stockholm syndrome, isn't it? But anyway, sending Royal Naval vessels to confront the French didn't do any harm to Johnson's popularity either amongst the gammons. Oh, but best not tell them that we've just given a contract for some Royal Naval frigates to the French. Just keep that to ourselves. But the fact that Labour have no current policy on Brexit, they haven't got a detailed policy on anything, but they don't have a policy on Brexit, which is the defining feature of our age, is clearly a complete madness. Now, they may sort of have a policy, but they're not shouting about it. And it's simple political logic that if you are not going to gain support by adopting a softer version of some defining policy that your opponents have. Like over the past few years, before we left the EU, that period of time between the Brexit referendum and leaving the EU, Labour had an official policy of a Brexit deal that would mean close alignment with Europe and certainly forming a customs union, a jobs first Brexit deal. Okay, sounds fine. But how would a Leaver or a Remainer with no particular loyalty to Labour take that? Imagine this person and they've got a Brexit view, but they're not tied to Labour. They'll vote for Labour when it suits them and they won't when it doesn't. So a Leaver looks at this as a soft version of Brexit, a softer Brexit than the Conservatives are offering. So it doesn't appeal to them. A Remainer looks at it as leaving the EU still. Well, we don't want to leave the EU, so they weren't interested either. So the only people arguing for this position in no man's land were those who were going to vote Labour anyway, and it was a vain attempt of trying to persuade others to vote Labour. It's like, well, you know, oh, there's Leavers here. There's a lot of Leavers. We want to attract them. Oh, well, we'll promise to leave as well. Oh, there's a load of Remainers. Oh, but we won't leave, like, really hard. The Leavers can vote Tory because the Tories are definitely leaving. The Remainers would like to vote for Labour so that we could oppose it, but we didn't oppose it. So this idea was supposed to be giving you the best of both worlds? No. To people who might vote Labour under the right conditions, but wouldn't automatically do so, there was no offer there at all. It was just Tory light. Brexit is too divisive. You had to be one or the other. And Labour had to be Remain, really. If you are Leave, and it doesn't matter what your Leave policy is, you are trying to take votes. You're trying to capture the ground that the Conservatives have already taken. The only ground that was winnable for the last few years was Remain. But of course, there's no ground anymore. There is no Leave. There is no Remain. Gone. Finished. Blown up. We've left. It's over. Done with. That cannot be quickly or easily reversed. There is now only making the best of Brexit while we turn ourselves to more, well, ultimately rejoining. But that's far in the future. We have to go through the checkpoints first. And the elections have had a few interesting results. A couple Brexit themed. The first was that Labour did well in Wales. Because I talked about the Scottish elections being very important, incredibly important. The local elections are symbolically important. But the Welsh Parliament had elections as well. And they went sort of as expected. But the point is that Welsh Labour did well. You know, and Welsh Labour had no trouble bashing Brexit in general and the consequences of Brexit specifically. They haven't shied away from that. This has meant that they were able to clearly distinguish themselves from the Conservatives, and I would argue, not proven, I would argue reap the rewards. Labour are now in control of the Welsh Parliament. It's not strong control, but it's there. Secondly, here's the thing, you'll go, but Brexit is all about Little England, isn't it? Would that really work here? Is this the problem, that Wales could get away with it, but in England you can't really because it's gammon land? Yes, and it did. See, the problem around England is the damage of Brexit is being hidden. The media are hiding it, the Conservatives of course are hiding it, and no one's shouting about it. Brexit hasn't just hit the Celtic nations, it has wrought its destruction everywhere. But this conversation is not being openly had everywhere. Labour should be shouting about it, shining a spotlight on it. There should be no difference in the way Labour are approaching Brexit in UK as a whole, but we mean in England, as opposed to Welsh Labour. They've got no problem bashing it. Scottish Labour got no problem bashing it. Well, why doesn't the larger national leadership bash it? They've shied away so far. So where is it obvious? Where can you really see Brexit writ large without anyone having to point it out? Well, there's parts of Kent. All those lorry parks blighting their green and pleasant land was not really appreciated by the people of Kent. And Kent is Tory. Kent is Tory, it's blue through and through. It's a Tory council. It elects Tory councils, it elects Tory MPs. Now, it hasn't suddenly flipped. I'm not going to say, oh, it's suddenly gone red. It's still a Tory county council. But Labour and the Greens have made some pretty big gains in areas where those lorry parks were dumped. It was a hell of a swing to Labour. And none of this is conclusive, but you look at the results. Overall, it was a bad week for Labour. You know, and you can talk about for many reasons. Ultimately, I would say the large thing that a lot of people will agree on is Labour didn't really stand for anything. They didn't have this is our policy, this is what you get from us in detail. But there were gains. And every single one of those gains for Labour were in areas that felt left out over the last few years. Labour really improved where either they were free to bash Brexit or where the damage that Brexit was causing was evident. In other words, where Labour were able to distinguish themselves from the Conservatives, Labour did quite well. Now, there's an awful lot of people saying, oh, the result of these elections shows this or this or this. And they're all saying different things, and I don't really want to get onto it, but I am going to say, I think it shows that if you can distinguish yourself from the Conservatives are crap, and everyone knows the Conservatives are crap. If you can just distinguish yourself from the Conservatives, people will see, oh, well, we'll vote for you because you represent something that's not crap. You also know it's not a defensible position to justify Labour having no clear position on one of the most important areas of policy in the UK right now. You know, you then mix in the fact that it's also a hopeless position to advocate that Labour even attempt to capture Brexit supporters when they couldn't hope to out-Brexit the Conservatives. So it's one of these things like, do you think Labour should have no policy on Brexit? I don't think many people would agree you do. So what is that policy? In opposition to Brexit or in support of Brexit? Support of Brexit, you're trying to win over Tory voters. No. That's not happening. The Tories how can you do that without being more extreme on your Brexit? And Labour are never going to be a more extreme Brexit party. It just leads to the inevitable conclusion, Labour have to come out strongly against at least the consequences of Brexit. I get that it's too divisive to come out against Brexit full stop, but you can come out against the consequences. You can attack the deal. They don't have to go the full rejoin. In fact, they should not. It's not realistic right now and could work against them. Absolutely. There are a lot of people who want the Brexit situation to be improved. There are a lot of people who are worried about reopening old Brexit wounds, however. Remember how powerful the Get Brexit Done message was. People just wanted it to be over. But promising a better deal by removing trade barriers with a customs union with the EU can get people on board. Attacking the damage to the economy, to jobs, to living standards, to consumer choice can absolutely get people on board. And they need to do it quickly. Don't wait for people to see the damage themselves and then jump on the bandwagon, because people will point out that that's what you've done. Does Starmer want to be called Captain Hindsight or Captain Foresight? Labour needs to stand apart from the Conservatives in a really obvious way. Everyone agrees that. People on the left of the party, on the right of the party, not in the party at all. Some would like Labour to do that with public services, health and social care, education, policing. And they should, but that's limited. Because the thing is, you can't distinguish yourself from the Tories on that. The problem is, it will not appear to be a different position. The Tories are promising great investment in all those things and great results in all those things. They will never appear, but they promise it. So how do you distinguish yourself from the Conservatives? Well, the Conservatives won't promise a closer relationship with Europe. They won't promise a customs union. They won't promise to get rid of trade barriers. Brexit is tearing Labour apart right now, but it should be a gift. If Labour gets strongly behind negotiating a comprehensive customs union, for example, that's a policy that the Tories won't touch. They won't even pretend to get on board with that. They'd be afraid of that. Should be an absolute gift for Labour. It is the one policy area where they can easily distinguish themselves from the Conservatives, and the Conservatives will not even attempt to outbid them on it. But Labour, for some reason, don't trust it. And one final point, although as I say, I'm going to come up with some more videos on this later, but I want to say here, a little aside. All the elections were bad for Labour in 2019, all of them. We lost badly in the local elections, the European elections and the general election last year. And made, I don't just mean we lost them in a, but we still made gains. There were no gains. We didn't make gains in any of those things. We lost, and lost again. I saw someone saying, as a result of these latest elections, the party's going backwards. No, it's not. It wasn't actually as bad as in 2019. You could still think it's not going forwards, and who could blame you? But as you drill down into the figures, in terms of vote share, Labour were actually closer to Conservatives this year than in 2019, by quite a bit. The thing with first past the post is that vote share counts for nothing if it's not concentrated in the right areas. What you need to do is to win lots of seats by a small margin. You win by small margins than have fewer seats by a large margin. But here's the thing. Improved vote share is still a step forwards. That's not to excuse the fact that Labour should have been better prepared. And it doesn't mean that they are moving forwards quickly enough to win in 2024. But it is objectively forward. And the important thing about moving forwards is that when it's not fast enough and you have to change your approach, you do need to make sure that you don't throw out the baby with the bathwater, which again is not an excuse to be too timid. But we do have to bear that in mind. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.